Hi, this is Mark. Welcome back to my channel. There's been a lot of talk in the media and on YouTube recently about the economic collapse, possibly even a global depression going into 22 or 2023. I'm going to analyze the data, figure out what it all means, and see if there isn't some way that we can all make us some money. If you could help me out with that YouTube algorithm and smash the like button, I would appreciate it. And if you don't want to miss any of my future videos, you can subscribe too. First, let's describe what a recession is. The oft-quoted definition is 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. Or to put it another way, 6 consecutive months in which economic growth is below zero. But as pointed out in this article, that's an oversimplification. And really determining whether the economy is in a recession or not is as much art as it is science. But it requires a significant decline in economic activity that is spread all across the economy and lasts for more than a few months. However, with unemployment under 4% for the entire 6 months and falling throughout the entire first quarter, no one really believed that the economy was in recession the first half of 2022. The real cause for the contraction in the first half of the year was related to a hangover from the COVID pandemic. Specifically, companies had supply chain issues and they were unable to get enough raw materials to finish certain products. They had partially completed materials either on the shipping dock or in their factories that did not count in GDP. These problems acquiring the raw materials and finishing products cause companies to draw down inventories more in the first half of the year than they had previously. These supply chain issues are decreasing, and economists are not expecting the drawdown on inventories to continue the rest of 2022. Sure enough, GDP bounced back in the third quarter, increasing by 2%. So everything is great now, right? Well, maybe not. The growth in the economy in the third quarter was also made up of a one-time event that economists are not expecting to continue in the future. Specifically, companies exported and sold more of their products overseas than they had in the first half of the year. The American economy is not the only one under pressure. The IMF is downgrading their forecasts for many countries around the world. There is no reason to believe that exports will continue to prop up the United States economy. I don't need to go into a great amount of detail about inflation. If you've been purchasing anything in the economy in the past 12 months, you know that prices have been increasing rapidly and extremely. Some items that are included in the CPI calculation don't affect people a lot. However, I believe that most people in their daily lives probably purchase food. So I'm going to take a look at some of the food items that have increased most rapidly during the past few years. Bacon, sausage, beef, and cooking oil are all up at least 15% year over year. And if actual price increases isn't enough for us to worry about, we have another pseudo-economic term to contend with. It's called shrinkflation. Shrinkflation is buying the same product at the same price, but getting less of the product. You can see some examples here. Given that all of the containers are smaller, you would think that the companies could pass along some of the savings that they have on their materials cost. The Federal Reserve has reacted to the overheating of the economy in a very predictable and clearly stated way. They began raising interest rates, frequently and a lot. The result was equally predictable. Mortgage rates have skyrocketed, increasing from 2% to over 7%, which is the highest in 20 years. Increasing mortgage rates by 5 percentage points was intended and designed to restrain the housing industry. The demand for houses immediately and the demand for the raw materials to build houses over time. This reduction in demand is exactly what is happening according to the president of the Indiana Builders Association. Hiring managers and other decision makers across the economic spectrum are already reacting to what the Federal Reserve has done, what the economic decision makers are seeing in the economy already, and what they are expecting to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. Cities are expecting tax revenues to decline as property values drop, and you can expect that many cities will institute hiring freezes during their next budget cycle. Private companies in various industries have already begun laying off employees. Companies in and related to the real estate industry were hit earliest and hardest, but companies in a wide range of industries are also laying off employees, expecting the economic downturn to take place in the near future. By now you're thinking that this is nothing but a doom and gloom video, and while there are certainly many black clouds on the economic horizon, there are also a couple of positive indicators that are saying that it's possible that the economic downturn won't be as steep or as long as some people are predicting in their global depression speak. The first indicator is inflation, the cost of goods and services in the economy. When people talk about inflation, most of the time they're talking about the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. However, there is also another indicator that the government collects data for, and that is called the GDP deflator. The two key differences between the CPI and the GDP deflator are that the GDP deflator does not include the cost of imported goods that people buy from other countries. However, it does include the costs of services, which the CPI does not. This last component, the cost of services, is especially important because people have been shifting their consumption from goods to services, specifically travel, dining, that kind of thing, rather than goods such as refrigerators and cars that they spent a lot of money on during the pandemic. The GDP deflator increased by 4.6% in the third quarter, down from an increase of 8.5% in the second quarter. Even though the GDP deflator is not the exact number that the Federal Reserve looks at in terms of its target rate for inflation, and even though the 4.6 number would be above the Fed's target rate, a drop by 4 percentage points is still significant. And if those numbers continue in future months, and if the number is confirmed by other parts of the economy, the data that the Fed looks at, this would be a good reason for the Fed to stop raising interest rates. Another positive sign for the economy is the unemployment rate. The hiring remains strong in September, with companies hiring 263,000 new workers, and the unemployment rate dropped slightly to 3.5%. One more point I want to make about the economy and the unemployment rate is specifically related to the labor participation rate. Some economists are saying that the unemployment rate is not really a good indicator of the strength of the economy, and they specifically point to the labor participation rate as being the reason why they say that. The labor participation rate is simply the percentage of Americans who are either working or are looking for work. In our cyclical economy, the labor participation rate drops during recessions. Companies lose business, they make fewer sales, and then they eventually lay employees off. These employees look for new jobs with other companies. Some of these employees will catch on to new employers. Others will not. Eventually, some of those employees who do not catch on with other companies will stop looking for work entirely. At that point, they become what's called discouraged workers. They are no longer included in the unemployment rate, nor are they in the labor participation rate. Because these discouraged workers are not included in the labor participation rate, that rate drops. Traditionally, when the economy reverts and becomes strong again, and employers start hiring and jobs become more plentiful, those discouraged workers re-enter the labor force, they get new jobs, and the labor participation rate goes back up. As you can see from this chart, the labor participation rate has not completely come back. It has been declining in recent years as the baby boomer generation began to retire. That deep trough you can see is from the COVID era when many people lost their job. And there has been a gradual increase since then, but it's only come back to about 2/3 of its pre-pandemic rate. Some economists are saying that this low participation rate is a sign of an unhealthy economy, that the unemployment rate is actually so low because there are so many discouraged workers who are not even looking for work. However, various studies discount this theory. The labor force is simply smaller than it was before the pandemic. Unfortunately, there were many pandemic-related deaths of people of a working age, and since the pandemic ended, people have exited the workforce either voluntarily or involuntarily. Many people who were near or at retirement age simply took retirement, sometimes at full retirement age or sometimes early retirement. There are also many people who have so-called long COVID, in which the effects of them being sick from COVID continue to affect them long after the virus has, in theory, left their system. Many of these people are on disability and therefore not working. The biggest decline in labor participation has been people 55 years of age or older. Most of these people were already at or near retirement age. All that the lower labor participation rate is telling us is that there is an acceleration of retirement of the baby boom generation because of the COVID pandemic. So how can we make money with all of this? Well, the first way is the stock market. Not surprisingly, the stock market falls during a recession. People spend less money, they buy less products, companies sell less products, and their sales fall, then eventually their profits fall, and their stock price falls at the end of that as well. The S&P 500 index is down about 18% for the year 2022, which is approaching the bear market value of 20%. The good news is that in a typical recession, stocks drop about 24%. So if this recession is like an average recession, we're not that far away from the bottom in terms of the stock market. In a recession, cash is king. You're able to purchase stocks on sale at a price well below what you could have a few months before. And when prices invariably rise, as they will, you will make a lot of money on the purchases that you made during the recession at rock bottom prices. The same is true for real estate, which is also under pressure from rising interest rates. The added benefit to purchasing real estate, especially when it's on sale like it's about to be, is that you get to use leverage. You don't have to put the entire purchase price of the house down. You can put 3.5% down or 20% down or somewhere in between and borrow the rest. Then when prices increase, you're making money not just on the amount of money you put down, the 20% let's say, but on the entire purchase price of the house. Your gain is magnified by the leverage you took out by the loan that you borrowed. Also, there is no reason to believe that interest rates will stay high. Even though they are at a 20-year high, they will probably go down at some point in the future. And when they do, you can always refinance your property, lock in the lower interest rate, and a lower monthly payment. I'm Mark. That's what I think about the economy right now and how you can weather the storms that are coming or they're here now. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would engage with me. Go ahead and drop a comment or a question down below. I do respond to all my comments. And until next time, keep that cash register spinning.